Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now. What if I told you there was an MLB pitcher who made the greatest hitters on the planet look like they were swinging at ghosts? A man who walked to the mound with a fastball that occasionally dipped into the mid-80s, slower than some college kids throw today, and yet systematically dismantled lineups with the cold surgical efficiency of a brain surgeon operating with a scalpel the size of a toothpick. What if I told you this pitcher went 19 wins and only 2 losses in a single season, posted back-to-back earned run averages under 1.80 for the first time since Walter Johnson did it in 1918 and 1919, and became the first man in baseball history to win 4 consecutive Cy Young Awards? And what if I told you that the secret behind all of it, the crowning jewel of one of the most extraordinary pitching careers the sport has ever seen, was taught to him by a mentor in the Nevada desert before he was old enough to shave? That pitcher is Greg Maddux, and his story doesn't start in the bright lights of Wrigley Field or the electric atmosphere of an Atlanta postseason. It starts in Las Vegas, Nevada, in the early 1980s, where a scrawny teenager and his older brother were quietly learning how to rewrite the rule book on what it means to be a great pitcher. By the time the baseball world caught on to what Greg Maddux was doing, it was already too late. He had figured out something the entire sport had overlooked, and he used it to carve out one of the most untouchable careers in the history of America's favorite pastime. This is the story of the man who seemingly couldn't miss a pitch, and exactly how he pulled it off. To understand what made Greg Maddux different from every other pitcher who laced up his cleats and climbed a mound, you have to understand the man who shaped him before any professional organization ever got their hands on him. His name was Ralph Meter, a former baseball scout who took it upon himself to work with Greg and his older brother Mike in Las Vegas during those formative early years. While every other coach in America was telling kids to throw as hard as they possibly could, Meter was preaching a radically different gospel. He told those two brothers that movement and location were worth more than velocity, that a well-placed pitch with late life would always beat a straight heater thrown with everything you had. That when things went wrong on the mound, the instinct to throw harder was exactly the wrong instinct. The right move was to trust your command, to slow down, to make the ball do the work. Maddux believed it the moment he heard it. He didn't fully know why, he just did. Tragically, Meter did not live to see Greg graduate from Valley High School in Las Vegas in 1984, but the lessons he left behind did not die with him. They were baked into Greg Maddux's DNA, and they would eventually make him a Hall of Famer. In his own Hall of Fame induction speech, Maddux looked back and credited Meter directly, saying that as a sophomore in high school, he was lucky enough to have Ralph as his first true pitching coach, that he was taught the basics in a specific order: movement, location, the ability to change speeds, and velocity last. He said that at first, like any kid, all he wanted to do was throw hard. But as he matured, he realized how right Meter had been all along. When the 1984 MLB draft arrived, Greg Maddux was not exactly sending scouts into a frenzy. He was listed generously at 5'11" and weighed around 145 pounds soaking wet. He looked more like a kid delivering newspapers than a future ace of a major league rotation. Most scouts took one look at that frame and moved right along. But one Chicago Cubs scout saw something different. A pitcher with unusual intelligence, pinpoint command for his age, and an ability to manipulate the baseball that went well beyond his years. That scout recommended the Cubs take him in the second round of the draft, and so they did. Greg Maddux was a Chicago Cub. For an 18-year-old kid from Las Vegas, being drafted by a major league organization was everything he had worked for. But the professional baseball journey doesn't begin in a big league stadium. It begins in the minors, small towns, long bus rides, and sparse crowds. For Maddux, it started in Pikeville, Kentucky, with the Cubs' rookie affiliate, and the loneliness hit hard. By his own admission, he was ready to pack his bags and go home. He was excelling on the field, but struggling emotionally with the distance from his family. What saved him wasn't a coach's pep talk. It was a teammate. Fellow minor leaguer Bob Mandeville took the young Maddux under his wing, played cards with him, helped him connect with other players, and essentially taught him how to navigate the adult world of professional baseball. Maddux later reflected that he learned how to live during that stretch, that you have to adapt to your new environment, learning the do's and don'ts of life on the road. That more grown-up perspective gave him the stability he needed to stop thinking about the bus ride home and start thinking about the big leagues. After steady progress through the Cubs minor league system and a dominant summer at AAA in 1986, he got the call every minor leaguer dreams about. His first major league start came against the Cincinnati Reds, a team he had idolized growing up, and he showed absolutely no reverence for his childhood heroes, going the distance and allowing only 3 earned runs for the victory. He then closed out the 1986 season with a memorable family moment, facing his older brother Mike, who was pitching for the Philadelphia Phillies on September 29th. The two had squared off in the backyard countless times growing up. Now they were doing it in a major league stadium. Mike allowed 3 runs in 3 innings and exited early. Greg went 7 2/3, helping his team to a comfortable 8-3 victory and walking away with the bragging rights heading into the offseason. Everything pointed to a breakout 1987. It never came. His first full season in the majors was a humbling education in the difference between minor league success and big league survival. His ERA was 5.61. His record in games he pitched was 9-21. The questions began swirling around whether this kid was ever going to become the star prospect the Cubs believed they had. And here is where the Greg Maddux story takes a turn that separates him from so many other talented players who hit a wall and never figure out how to climb over it. He went and found a sports psychologist. He spent that entire offseason working on his mind. He later articulated the logic as simply as anyone ever has, saying that if the game is more than 60% mental, shouldn't he be spending 60% of his training time on the mental side? So that is what he did. He worked to understand what was within his control and what wasn't. The noise from the stands, the judgment of coaches, the pressure of expectations, none of it was his to manage. But his preparation, his execution, his focus in the moment, those things were entirely his. Once he truly internalized that distinction, something unlocked. He stopped pitching under the crushing weight of what everyone else was thinking and started pitching freely, with genuine confidence, for the first time in his career. The results in 1988 were immediate and dramatic. He went 18-8, earned his first All-Star selection, and the breakout that the organization had been waiting for was finally underway. From that point forward, Maddux did not post another losing record for over 2 decades. In 1989, now the undisputed ace of the Cubs rotation, he went 19-12 with a 2.95 ERA and led Chicago to the National League East title, only the second time the franchise had finished first in the division in 45 years. The Cubs hadn't been to the playoffs in 5 years. Now they were there and Maddux had carried them. But the postseason didn't cooperate and the Giants eliminated Chicago in the NLCS. It was a painful end, and one that would take years to fully process. He continued to pitch at an elite level through the early 1990s, cementing himself as the best pitcher in baseball. In 1992, he went 20-11 with a 2.18 ERA, won his first Cy Young Award, and proved once and for all that the Cubs had something absolutely irreplaceable on their roster. And then they let him walk. The organization's reasoning at the time was that he had never won 20 games and never won the Cy Young. He went out and did precisely both in 1992, came to them expecting the contract he had earned, and was shown the door instead. Contract talks broke down entirely, and Maddux became a free agent. It was one of the most spectacular front office mistakes in the history of the franchise, and the baseball world knew it even as it was happening. The New York Yankees reportedly brought the biggest offer. Big market, big money, the Bronx. But Maddux was not shopping for money, he was shopping for wins. And there was a deeply practical consideration at the heart of his decision that revealed the kind of cerebral operator he was. Back then, the National League and American League did not face each other during the regular season. Crossing over to the Yankees meant facing an entirely new set of hitters, batters he had never studied, never faced, never built a scouting book on. For most pitchers, that might not be a deal breaker. For Greg Maddux, whose entire identity was built on knowing hitters better than they knew themselves, it was disqualifying. He signed a 5-year, $28 million contract with the Atlanta Braves, and it would go down as one of the greatest bargains in baseball history. In Atlanta, Maddux stepped into a rotation that already featured Tom Glavine and John Smoltz, forming what would become the most feared starting 3 in baseball. The Braves had lost back-to-back World Series in 1991 and 1992. Now they had the best pitcher alive. His opening day start as a Brave came at Wrigley Field against his former team. The Chicago crowd made sure to let him know how they felt, booing him when he walked to the mound. He responded by going 8 1/3 innings of shutout ball and winning 1-0. The Cubs organization had let the best pitcher in baseball walk, and he came back and rubbed it in with the most efficient clinical performance possible. That was Greg Maddux. He did not get emotional on the mound. He got results. What followed between 1992 and 1995 is the most dominant sustained pitching stretch in the modern history of Major League Baseball. He won 4 consecutive Cy Young Awards, something that had never been done before in the history of the award. During that 4-year window, he went 75-29 with a 1.98 ERA. In 889 innings from 1994 through 1997, he walked just 102 batters, including intentional passes. Think about that. Over nearly 900 innings of work, he issued roughly 79 unintentional walks. That is almost incomprehensible command. In 1994 specifically, his ERA of 1.56 was the second lowest since Bob Gibson's historic 1968 season, the last year of the elevated mound. The league ERA that year was 4.21. He was pitching in a completely different dimension from every other arm in the sport. In 1995, he went 19-2 with a 1.63 ERA in a year when the overall league ERA was 4.23. He became the first pitcher to post back-to-back ERAs under 180 since Walter Johnson accomplished it in 1918 and 1919. What made all of this possible was exactly what Ralph Meeder had taught him before he was old enough to drive. Maddux never chased velocity. He never tried to overpower anyone. He was operating on a completely different principle. That movement and location were the true weapons of a great pitcher. He could make pitches look like balls when they were 5 feet in front of home plate, only to watch them bend back into the strike zone for a called strike 3 while the batter stood there frozen. He was creating optical illusions at 60 feet and 6 inches. He was the greatest illusionist the mound has ever produced, and he was doing it with a fastball that routinely topped out in the mid-80s. His mechanics were so clean, so repeatable, that every pitch came out of his hand looking identical until the very last moment. The changeup that looked like a fastball, the two-seamer that ran off the black just as the batter committed to swinging at it, the cutter that jammed a right-hander who thought the pitch was out over the middle of the plate. He did not just pitch to the strike zone, he weaponized the border between the strike zone and the 4 inches surrounding it. Hall of Famers who faced him struggled to find adequate language to describe the experience. Wade Boggs said it felt like Maddux was inside your mind with you, that when he knew you weren't going to swing, he threw a straight one. And it was like he had a crystal ball hidden inside his glove. Orel Hershiser, himself a legendary pitcher, said simply that Maddux could throw a ball in a teacup. Joe Morgan once said he could put a baseball through a lifesaver if you asked him to. These were not casual compliments from ordinary observers. These were baseball lifers who had seen everything the sport had to offer, and they were running out of words. All of this dominance set the stage for the 1995 postseason, the moment when Maddux finally matched his regular season mastery with the October crown that defines legacies. The Braves had been to the World Series in 1991 and 1992 and lost both times, narrowly and painfully. Atlanta was a franchise perpetually on the edge of greatness that kept falling short of the summit. Now they had the best pitcher on the planet, and they were going back to the World Series against the Cleveland Indians, the most powerful offense in the American League. Game 1 presented immediate adversity. Kenny Lofton, who had led the American League in stolen bases for 5 consecutive years, reached on an error and immediately stole second, then advanced to third, before scoring without the Indians recording so much as a hit in the inning. It felt like the old Atlanta nightmare starting all over again. But Maddux settled in, retired 12 consecutive batters at one point, and kept the Braves close until they scratched out a 3-1 lead in the 7th. He was not coming off that mound. He finished the complete game, winning 3-2, and Atlanta had its statement victory. From there, the Braves' pitching staff suffocated Cleveland's bats across the entire series. Atlanta won the 1995 World Series in 6 games, delivering the franchise its first championship since relocating to the city in 1966. Maddux, the skinny kid from Las Vegas who nearly quit professional baseball in Pikeville, Kentucky because he missed his family, was a world champion. The 1995 championship was the peak, but nowhere close to the end. Maddux continued to anchor the Braves' rotation for 8 more years, posting ERAs consistently below 3, finishing in the top 5 of Cy Young voting 4 more times between 1996 and 2000, and never missing a meaningful start. From 1993 through 2003, his 11 years in Atlanta, the Braves won the division crown in every completed season. In that time, Maddux went 198-88 with a 2.63 ERA. The Braves' decade of dominance was built on the foundation of his reliability. In 23 big league seasons, he spent only 15 days on the disabled list, a 2-week stint in 2002 with an inflamed nerve in his lower back. That is it. 15 days, over 2 decades of professional pitching. The efficiency with which he worked was its own form of art. The term Maddux was later coined to describe when a pitcher throws a complete game shutout in fewer than 100 pitches, and Maddux holds the record for accomplishing this feat 13 times. Nobody else is close. In a single month in 1997, he threw 3 complete games under 100 pitches, 90 against the Phillies, 84 against the Yankees, and then a breathtaking 78-pitch complete game against the Cubs. In that 78-pitch masterpiece, he threw 64 of those pitches for strikes. Mark Grace, his former teammate with the Cubs who was playing first base that day for Chicago, said afterward that if his life depended on one game, he would want Maddux to throw it. That is about as high a compliment as one baseball player can pay another. When he returned to Chicago as a free agent before the 2004 season, the Wrigley faithful gave him the welcome home he deserved. He was no longer the same pitcher, he was 38 years old, but he was still a reliable, durable professional who gave his team a chance to win every time he took the ball. He won his 300th career game on August 7, 2004. He recorded his 3,000th strikeout on July 26, 2005, becoming only the 13th pitcher to reach that milestone. After brief stints with the Dodgers and Padres from 2006 through 2008, he retired at the age of 42 with 355 career wins, 3,371 strikeouts, and a legacy that the sport had never quite seen before. The final numbers are staggering in both their volume and their quality. Maddux is the only pitcher in the history of Major League Baseball to accumulate more than 300 wins, more than 3,000 strikeouts, and fewer than 1,000 walks, finishing with exactly 999 walks in more than 5,000 innings of work. 300 wins, 3,000 strikeouts, under 1,000 walks. It had never been done before. It has not been done since. He holds the record for most Gold Gloves by any player at any position in baseball history, winning 18 of them. He recorded at least 15 wins in a Major League record 18 different seasons. He was voted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 2014 in his first year of eligibility, receiving 97.2% of the votes cast. Bobby Cox, who managed him for over a decade in Atlanta, said when asked whether Maddux was the best pitcher he ever saw, the smartest, the most competitive, the best teammate, that the answer was yes to every single one of those questions. What makes the Greg Maddux story resonate beyond the raw numbers and the hardware is what it represents as a philosophy. Every generation of baseball produces a new wave of power arms, pitchers who can blow triple digits past helpless hitters, guys who set radar gun records and make highlight packages with triple-digit strikeout totals. Each passing year, some new velocity benchmark is shattered, and every coach, every scout, every front office is chasing that number. In today's game, a pitcher touching the mid-80s would be a novelty act. And yet, Greg Maddux pitched with a fastball that occasionally reached those numbers late in his career and kept getting batters out. Because of a truth the game keeps trying to forget and keeps relearning. When pitchers throw the ball as hard as they can, they often miss their target, extend at bats, and give hitters more chances to do damage. Maddux ended at bats quickly, finished games efficiently, and took the ball every 5 days without complaint because he was not trying to overpower anyone. He was trying to outthink everyone. His mentor told him that movement and location would last longer than hard and straight. He believed it as a teenager. He proved it over 23 professional seasons. He proved it against the best lineups the game ever assembled, across 3 decades, in stadiums filled with hostile crowds and October pressure. The man who couldn't miss a pitch. The pitcher who turned the strike zone into his personal canvas and used it to paint one of the greatest careers the sport has ever witnessed. The teenager who almost quit in Kentucky, who worked on his mind when his body wasn't enough, who turned down more money to chase a championship, and who stood at Cooperstown decades later and thanked the man who taught him, a man long gone, for the philosophy that made it all possible. That is Greg Maddux. That is what a Hall of Fame career looks like when it is built on something bigger than a radar gun reading. Now, if you made it all the way here, you already know what time it is. Smash that like button, drop a comment telling us who you think belongs on the Mount Rushmore of starting pitchers, and if you haven't subscribed to Red Dust Report yet, what exactly are you waiting for? New content is dropping every single week, and you do not want to miss what is coming next. And speaking of players who defied every conventional rulebook, what if we told you there was a hitter on the other side of this equation who was just as impossible to stop? A man who would infuriate pitchers by launching home runs on pitches 5 inches out of the strike zone, and who once hit a baseball that literally bounced in the dirt before he launched it into the seats. If you want to know how Vladimir Guerrero turned the entire concept of the strike zone into a personal inconvenience, click the video on your screen right now. You are going to want to see this.